Don't make a sound. If you do, these ultra noise sensitive creatures will tear your body apart in milliseconds. How do you get you and your family to safety? Let's break down the mistakes, triumphs, and how to beat the noise predators in A Quiet Place. This innocent family is prey. Their world has become a battlefield where silence is the only means of survival. At any turn, they can be hunted by ferocious creatures with ultra-sensitive hearing. Scouring this pharmacy for medicine, this mother, Evelyn Abbott, grabs a bottle of pills for her sick son, Marcus. That's when her deaf daughter, Reagan, appears from behind and asks if Marcus will be alright. Evelyn informs her that the boy is going to be okay. Reagan wanders over to her youngest brother, Bo, and they draw with chalk on the aisles. Bo draws a rocket, signing that he wants to go to space. He then goes to a toy rocket, wanting to take it back home. He walks over and pushes this toy spaceship off the shelf as Reagan rushes to catch it. Their father, Lee, shows up in the distance, ordering Bo to go fight his mother. Reagan looks through what her dad has gathered and finds electronic hardware. Lee tells the girl that it's meant for her to help work on her hearing aid. His wife taps his shoulder, informing him that the sun will be going down. They need to make it home before night falls to be safe. Bo walks over with the rocket ship, with Lee taking the batteries out and signing to his son, telling him that it's too loud. He's disappointed, but the others walk outside, and Reagan sneakily gives it back to him, not realizing that she has made a fatal mistake. Bo grabs his misplaced batteries before joining the family. They travel out of town and into this quiet forest, walking back to their home. The sound of a siren breaks the silence. Lee turns around to see Bo playing around with the rocket ship. Running back, he spots dangerous beasts headed towards their direction, but he's too late. Poor baby Bo. Don't cry yet. How could this have been prevented? The most straightforward solution is to take away Bo's toy spaceship. He's a child who does not understand the full implications of the world in which he now lives. It's not really his own fault that leads to his death, but his family could have been more cautious. Reagan seems to be the main person keeping an eye on Bo during this trip to the store. She speedily prevents the spaceship toy from hitting the floor, averting disaster. Meanwhile, the parents are preoccupied with gathering all their needed supplies. These are necessary tasks, but what about Marcus? Yes, he's sick, but that does not mean he's useless. He could be a second pair of eyes on Bo. Let Bo play in the same area as Marcus and use the older brother as a babysitter for the younger one. This does not require Marcus to move around much, if at all, simply to prevent Bo from making any loud noises. Reagan can double up on this duty, and there's virtually no chance for Bo to endanger the family. As a hard and fast rule, none of the children should be let out of an adult's sight when the family is away from home. The number one priority is safety, and Bo is the most at risk because of his lack of self-awareness at such a young age. He does not yet understand how loud the sounds he can make will be. Bo is able to get the toy because everyone else takes their eyes off of him for a moment as they prepare to leave the store. They also seemingly do not check on him as they walk towards home. Both of these decisions prove to be fatal errors for Bo. Lee takes the batteries out of the spaceship toy before Bo can play with it, which is a smart move, but not decisive enough. Bo clearly understands how to put the batteries back into the toy, which he does. How can the toy be made even safer than removing the batteries? Modified the toy so it can't produce sound. If the internal wiring is cut, the toy cannot make sound, meaning it is now Bo-proofed. For further security, one of the other family members can hold on to Bo's toy until they return home and have more time to Bo-proof it. There has to be room for the toy in someone's bags or hands. It seems a bit cruel to deprive a child of a toy in the already harsh world this family is living in, but precautions must be taken. That does not mean Bo cannot have the toy ever, but that he must abide by certain conditions for everyone's safety. As the family leaves the shore, why does no one check on Bo? He trails behind everyone else, giving him free range to activate the siren on the toy. Marcus is sick and needs caring, and evidently also needs to be caring. But where is the same attention for the youngest Abbott? Aside from not checking to make sure he has no life-endangering contraband, why is Bo walking at the back of the line anyway? So he should be squarely in the middle of the family, or as in some wolf packs, he could be placed right behind his father at the front of the line. This puts both the injured or most vulnerable Abbotts at the front of the line, along with their father who can protect them. Then at the back of the line is Evelyn, who can also quickly turn into defensive mode to protect her family from threats approaching from the rear. This formation is as close as the family could get to total security, a sort of no child left behind approach. But as they proceeded, a child was literally left behind to fend for themselves, and it cost that child their life. 472 days later, their boy is dead, and the family now lives a quiet life on this farm. Reagan wakes up from an afternoon nap as she sees her mom ask for help with daily errands. Lee observes them from his makeshift surveillance room filled with information regarding the deadly creatures that possess unfathomably sensitive hearing. Sitting down, he sends out a Morse code SOS through his radio, marking off another point of contact. He walks outside to see his son Marcus playing around with their long inoperable car before heading inside the family home and into their cellar, where Evelyn is setting up decorations for their new baby on the way. Outside, a string of warning lights glow green, indicating safety. They live an isolated, self-sustaining, safe life, but the threat of the creatures is never gone. It lurks just beyond the perimeter of the farm. That night, Evelyn prepares dinner for the family and orders Reagan to help. She walks over to see her father washing his face, gesturing at him to come and eat. They get ready to eat and begin a short prayer, silently holding hands. Later, the kids play a game of Monopoly when Reagan accidentally knocks over this lamp, causing the carpet to catch on fire. Lee runs over to put out the mess with a towel and cautiously looks around their house, scared that they might have just attracted someone wanted attention. That's when they hear a blast coming from upstairs. Reagan stands up quietly, but her father insists the girls stay put, glaring out of their window. A group of raccoons fall down from the roof while making a screeching sound. Marcus apologizes for the scare, but they're still safe for now. Lee continues working through the night to improve Reagan's hearing aid, managing to access a new radio wave frequency. Evelyn walks down the stairs and hugs her husband. He looks back and mouths the word beautiful. Lee gets up to dance with him, slowly caressing each other as the woman places an earbud into his ear. The pair listens to a romantic song while taking a look at their new child. Lee kisses his wife's forehead while dancing the night away. The next day, Lee continues work around their house, while Evelyn checks on the progress of their newborn, estimating that she's only around 3 weeks from giving birth. Reagan quietly walks into their house on their tippy toes, suddenly being caught by her dad, who informs her that she isn't allowed to venture into the basement. Lee tells her that his daughter already knows there's dangerous information down there. Reagan insists that it's alright, but her dad changes the subject and reveals that he took small amplifiers from the stereo to enhance her hearing aid. She informs her that it won't increase the radio's frequency. Lee tries comforting the girl by caressing her face, but Reagan freaks out and demands that he stop. Placing the hearing aid inside of her hand, he decides to get up and leave her alone. Inside the house, Evelyn teaches her son math. She slowly guides him through addition and subtraction when Lee interrupts, telling Marcus that it's time to go. He looks towards his mother, frightened, and begs her to let him stay home. Evelyn insists that he'll be okay, with his dad making sure that he'll be safe on their journey outside, using it as a way to make sure that Marcus will be able to look after the family when they get old. As Lee readies to leave, Marcus refuses to go. That's when Reagan offers to accompany her father instead, but Lee insists that she stay here to help Evelyn. She turns away disappointed, while Lee promises to let her come next time. Reagan walks back into the house and mopes in her room. She tries the new hearing aid, which has little improvement. She begins to cry, but then she walks to her backpack. After throwing some clothes into it, she goes to the cabinet to grab an item wrapped in cloth, adding it to her bag, then picks up a multi-tool and heads out. Lee and his son arrive at a nearby river as the dad shows him how to set up traps, collecting fish for their family. Marcus freaks out seeing the animal flop around, scared that it'll attract the deadly monsters. Lee insists that he calm down, explaining to his son that the river will block out any small noises. It's safe to make low-volume sounds as long as there aren't any signs of a monster nearby. Lee stands up and tells his son that he needs to show him something. Meanwhile, Evelyn slowly packs a bag of wet clothes from the laundry, hauling the heavy bag quietly up the stairs. That's when it gets stuck on a nail and she accidentally pulls too hard, ripping the bag and making a loud thumping sound. The nail gets pulled out of the wood further, now a dangerous spike. It's a simple mistake, but in a noiseless world like this, even the smallest of mistakes could mean death. Lee guides his son to a waterfall. He suddenly screams while standing next to the waterfall. Marcus looks at him shocked, while the father speaks aloud, declaring that it's completely fine to let out some steam. Later, as they're relaxing by the waterfall, Marcus questions why his sister couldn't come, asking Lee if he blames Reagan for Bo's death. He reveals that she blames herself for the brother's death. Lee says that Bo's death was no one's fault, and he still loves his daughter, but Marcus reveals that Reagan proudly does not know this. Meanwhile, Reagan leaves the family home and walks the forest, arriving at the same bridge where her brother was killed. She produces his spaceship toy from her small bag and places it on a small memorial the family has made, cutting the wires so it still lights up, but without making any noise. At home, Evelyn cries in her bedroom about the escalating tensions. Meanwhile, Marcus and Lee find an abandoned house on their way home, but then the kid bumps into his father, who has stopped in his tracks. Then, Marcus sees a creepy old man is staring right at them. He spots a woman lying dead on the ground. Lee gestures for him to keep quiet, but the man lets out a massive roar, forcing Lee to take his son and run for their lives. This old man has lost everything, and now he's given up all hope. Lee rushes behind this tree and covers his son's mouth as the thudding sounds of a nearby monster rapidly approach. He watches the old man be mutilated, making sure to keep Marcus quiet in the chaos. Okay, that's one spectacularly dangerous way to go. Assuming that this is the trail that Lee and Marcus have taken before in order to access the waterfall and go fishing, they must have passed within the general vicinity of this old couple's house. Claiming safety in numbers in a world where silence is truly golden is a stretch, but it would be important to know the general whereabouts of your neighbors. As Lee and Marcus pass by this house regularly, they could check in on the couple. Had the old man known the Abbotts, he likely would not have wanted to die in such a reckless and violent manner after his wife's passing. The Abbotts could have potentially helped the couple with medicine, care, or food through the time since the monsters arrived on Earth. This act of empathy and kindness would again likely influence the old man to survive at whatever point the wife did die. Given the wife's state on the forest floor and the blood surrounding her, it seems as if something more unexpected occurred. This could have been a creature attack, which would be partly why the old man knows his scream will lead to his death. As evidenced by Lee's research whiteboard in the basement, there are at least 3 creatures in this area to be wary of. It is very probable that one of these 3 monsters killed this old woman. With all these things considered, it's wise that Lee stops Marcus from getting any closer. Lee might not know exactly what's about to happen, but is aware that something is going down. Could he have prevented the appearance of the monsters though? First, Lee could try to reason with the man. The man may not know sign language, but a few simple signals to ask him to stay silent as Lee approaches him would be understandable. Then the two could try to whisper or have some other extremely quiet means of communication to reason with the man. Perhaps he could appeal to the man's empathy towards his own son to convince him not to call the monsters to their location. If that doesn't work, more aggressive tactics should be taken. Lee could charge the man and try to cover his mouth so as to not let him scream. This seems easy enough as they're not but a few feet away from each other, and Lee is younger and more in shape. Lee could also use any of his belongings as a weapon against the man. If he had a firearm on him, he could risk the single loud crack of shooting the gun at the man to prevent him from screaming, though cold-blooded murder does not seem to be in his vocabulary. He could use any of his other items to similarly distract the man from screaming. For example, take a fresh-caught fish from his pack and offer it to the man. If Lee is lucky, the man might even take the fish and decide to keep on living after all. These actions may seem like the most trivial things a person can do, but in such an emotional time, a small act of kindness can change someone else's entire perspective. This is what needs to happen in order to stop this man from dying and endangering Lee and Marcus. That night, Evelyn's water begins to break and leaves her in a terrifying situation. She heads down the staircase to take a seat and realizes that she's about to make a new addition to the family at the most inconvenient time. Walking into the basement, Evelyn forcefully steps on the nail piercing her foot. She covers her mouth to avoid screaming. To end her excruciating pain, she rips it out on her own. Evelyn limps down the remaining stairs and turns on their red warning lights before heading back up. Suddenly, a monster walks right in front of her. Evelyn is all alone, about to give birth, and now she has a bigger, more terrifying, life-threatening issue to deal with. Evelyn scampers back into the basement and looks around for a timer. She quietly crouches down and she hears the monster pacing around upstairs. Hiding in the corner of the room and watching the terrifying creature walk around her basement, she's almost helpless to do anything but hide. That's when her contractions kick in, and Evelyn bites her own hand in order to stay quiet. Suddenly, the timer rings and the monster rushes off, leaving Evelyn with a chance to escape. She quickly heads upstairs and is about to leave the house, but changes plans as another creature stalks around. Lee and Marcus arrive back home and see the red lights scattered all around. They hide behind a wall while Lee signs the word rocket to his son, asking him to make a loud sound to distract the monsters away from Evelyn, assuring him that he's capable of pulling it off. Marcus runs out to deal with the oncoming threat and makes it over to the secret compartment hidden in their crops, finding a lighter. He ignites this piece of string next to him as Lee grabs a loaded shotgun from their bedroom. Okay, has escalated rapidly. So fast. Let's rewind and slow down. There is clearly unresolved trauma from the death of Bo. How to beat the monsters attacking the family? Work through your trauma, go to therapy, communicate. Seriously, this family needs to talk about their problems. That is never easy, but is always the key to happiness. If Lee had explicitly vocalized, or rather signed, his feelings towards Reagan, and made her understand that no one blames her for Bo's death, then Reagan would likely not have run away from home. Marcus seems the most in tune with his sister's feelings, so it's odd that he has not expressed these observations before. If he had done so, some of the events that are in motion could be playing out quite differently. While Lee and Megan go off to fish, Reagan needs to stay with her mother. This rule would be needed at any time, but is paramount while Evelyn is pregnant. This far along, she could go into labor almost at any moment. And what do you know? She just did. Now she's alone at one of the most dangerous points of her life. She needs help. If as Lee and Marcus were leaving to go fishing, Lee had taken the extra time to sincerely explain why it's important for Reagan to stay with her mother, perhaps she would have. Or Lee could have allowed Reagan to come in place of Marcus. Is it not necessary for both children to understand how to fish? This would help strengthen the bond between him and his daughter, as well as leave Evelyn with someone who truly wanted to be by her side at that moment. After Lee and Marcus leave, however, Evelyn allows Reagan to wander off. Time by herself is clearly needed, but there's an awful lot of that and it's too much. At no point in the afternoon does Evelyn go to check on her daughter. Though this should be approached delicately, it would have multiple purposes. After some time processing by herself, Reagan needs to be comforted, reminded of her worth, and love her family has towards her. Secondly, when Evelyn goes to comfort her daughter, it would also comfort her, which she needs. Finally, the simple act of Evelyn going to check on her daughter would reveal that Reagan is missing. Knowing this information sooner changes the course of action. Evelyn should not leave the house to go searching for her daughter, but if she found her missing, she could immediately go to switch the warning lights from green to red. This would hopefully alert Lee and Marcus to trouble as soon as they're close enough to see the lights. It would also be a warning to Reagan if she was not far from home that her mother is in trouble. Not waiting to turn on the warning lights until she's in labor would also put less strain on Evelyn. Going down into the basement without the stress of going into labor would probably allow Evelyn to pay more attention to her surroundings and avoid the nail that is protruding and waiting to strike. Now Evelyn has another horrible pain to deal with. After pulling the nail out of her foot, Evelyn now has to deal with the impending birth of her child. Rather than a happy occasion, it is one of sheer terror. Babies are loud. They cannot understand the rules of the world they're born into. They are not easy to quiet down, let alone when their mother is exhausted and bleeding out of her foot. The baby needs to be born somewhere that has been soundproofed so that Evelyn can worry less about if the monsters will hear its cries. She should head to the baby's room, which the family has spent much time preparing for just such scenarios. It has been wallpapered many times over to decrease any sound escaping, and it has all the necessary supplies. It is also located downstairs, so it would be far easier to get to than almost any other room in the house. It is not only automatically the safest room in the house because of the setup, but it is probably also the place that Lee is going to think of first when checking for his wife once he's home. Why would she not go to that room? When Lee and Marcus get back to the farm, they do the right thing by immediately launching into offensive mode. Without knowing all the details, they understand by the red warning lights that things are in dire situations. There's no time to fully investigate before taking action. Setting off rockets is a risky move because it's loud, and while it will distract and confuse any creatures on the farm, it will also draw other creatures further out of the region towards this noisy area. That increases the stakes of this family's fight. Evelyn makes her way upstairs to the bathroom, wincing in pain. The baby is slowly coming out of her womb. She climbs into the bathtub as blood begins to pour out, and she tries to give birth without making a sound. Hearing the monster slowly walking up the stairs, she muffles the sound of the baby with a blanket. At the same time, Lee runs out of the barn while fireworks fire off in the distance. Meanwhile, Reagan wakes up miles away from the house. She sees the fireworks exploding across the sky and begins running home. Lee cautiously arrives at their house with his gun ready to fire, heading upstairs and making sure to stay quiet. That's when he enters the bathroom, finding a bathtub full of dried blood. Thinking that Evelyn has already been killed, he breaks down, fighting back tears, when suddenly his wife sticks her bloody hand on the shower door. Lee quickly opens it up to find his wife holding their newborn baby. Outside, Marcus walks towards the house before hearing a strange sound nearby. His flashlight begins to flicker on and off. Suddenly fearing that he's about to be attacked, Marcus sprints into the cornfields. Hearing the sound of a monster, he looks behind as spotted and accidentally runs into a car wheel, knocking himself out. Lee takes Evelyn and their newborn baby into the other house. Afraid of the attention from the baby's cries, he rushes them downstairs and away from harm. As he places this mattress over the floor, he doesn't realize that a monster has already entered their home. Lee takes his family downstairs to the secret room while attaching a ventilator to the baby's face and placing it in a soundproofed box, as he hears a monster pouncing around upstairs. Evelyn wakes up from a nightmare while her husband insists that she's alright. The monsters can't hear them, and their newborn has been safely delivered. That's when Evelyn questions where her other children have gone. Lee assures her that they'll be fine, but she mentions that Reagan is out there by herself. Mentioning the fireworks Marcus set off, his wife calms down and believes that they're safe. She lies back down as their newborn cries, and Evelyn reveals that she had a boy. She begins to explain how heavy the child was and how out of strength she felt, but wishes she could have carried him home. Lee realizes she's not talking about their newborn, but rather Bo, their dead son. Evelyn questions how they can call themselves parents by leaving their children out in danger, asking Lee to promise that he'll bring them home safely. Outside, Reagan slowly walks through the crops to find this light abandoned near their family truck. Reaching for the device, she's grabbed by Marcus and they embrace each other quietly, relieved they both survived. Then, they head to the silo's roof and light a fire to signal to their dad, but quickly run out of oil to fuel the flames. Marcus gestures to reassure his sister that their dad is on the way. He gives her a big hug as they wait it out, but both are unsure what will happen. That's when Lee heads out of their secondary home to go look for his kids, without knowing the new danger threatening his wife. Downstairs, Evelyn watches as a water leak begins to trickle into their secret hideout. The entire basement begins filling up with water, while she blankly stares at the makeshift baby silencer, spotting a deadly monster right behind it. Evelyn slowly dips her feet into the water, while the creature dives in. It's a terrifying situation, and any kind of loud noise will mean the death of both Evelyn and her child. She quietly walks over to her baby's cradle, taking off the lid to remove her child. Suddenly, the monster appears right in front of her. Evelyn slowly backs off and hides behind a stream of water, while Lee is outside looking for the other children. He reaches the abandoned vehicle among the crops and finds Reagan's sweater, but at the same time in the basement, the creature looks at Evelyn. Okay, time to play a game of Marco Polo with the monsters. Evelyn and her baby have got to get out of this room before they drown. But first, let's discuss Lee and the other children quickly. After Lee finds his wife to have successfully given birth without making enough noise to get her and the child killed by these ultra-sensitive hearing monsters, he should do things differently. This is, of course, a great moment. He now has a new child if it can survive this night of terror, and he does not currently have a dead wife. Both of these things are worth celebrating once the massive threats to them are eliminated. Lee does the proper thing by getting Evelyn to the soundproofed baby room as quickly as possible and securing the baby within its specially made crib/hideout. As horrible as it sounds, now that Lee has done this, his priority should no longer be with his wife and newborn. Hear me out. He can and will come back to them as soon as the coast is clear, but at this very moment, his two other children are in more danger than the two people he's with. Evelyn is at most times a skilled survivalist and simply needs to rest. She has just given birth and is in a weakened state, so the best thing for her is to not be bothered. The baby is in a similar position since, it was born less than an hour ago. The baby's room, which these three are currently in, is one of, if not perhaps the safest room on the farm. It has soundproofing and supplies and is hidden underground. Leave the woman to rest alongside her newborn and leave her a gun to protect herself with, then get out and find your kids. The quicker Lee can do this, the quicker he can return to his wife and infant. Right now, Reagan and Marcus are both extremely vulnerable out in the open. They don't know what to do in this life-threatening situation, which they've never been in before. Compare this to Evelyn, who has just given birth for the 4th time. Granted, that is not something that gets significantly easier each time it happens, but based on pure experience, she is farther ahead in the game than her two children, who are stuck on top of a corn silo with monsters stalking the ground a few dozen to 100 feet below. Lee needs to grab a flashlight and head outside. There have got to be a few other weapons scattered throughout the house and farm that he can replace his shotgun with, so that Evelyn can have a way to more easily defend herself. All she's probably going to do right now is sleep anyway. Reagan and Marcus do not have anything in the way of weapons, but they do have a flashlight and a wide vantage point. If Lee were to exit the house, the kids could notice immediately. Both parties would have flashlights that would allow them to communicate silently with each other. Flashing his light at his children could give them a simple message to either come down to him or to stay up there if that is safer. If at any point Lee had taught them Morse code, which it seems likely he would have taught Marcus this, he could use the flashlight to signal Morse code instructions. The children have lit a fire on top of the silo, making their presence impossible for their father to overlook, but keeping them out of sight of the blind monsters. The fire also adds an advantage. It can be used as a weapon. If worse came to worse, the children could use the fire against an attacking creature. It might not kill it, but should at least frighten the creature away. Staying on top of the silo is their best option at the moment. Once outside, Lee can signal for his kids to make their way slowly and quietly towards the house. Then, the trio get back down into the soundproofed room to wait out the night with the reunited family. With that said, Evelyn now is trapped in a room that is rapidly filling with water. If Lee had acted sooner to get the family together, they would all be in this room, which sounds horrible, but isn't. With more people in the space, they could create distracting sounds so that one by one, they can escape the death trap. If the children or Lee are upstairs, they can move things around to draw the monster out and allow Evelyn to leave. but Evelyn is on her own. Her best option is not to wait here in the rising water, but to try and swim for the stairs. Submerging her infant underwater is a terrible idea that will likely end in its death. But had she not removed it from the crib it was already in, she could slowly float the crib towards the stairs. This would probably be a quieter affair than trying to move the baby without the crib. Plus, once the baby is out of the basement, it will need to be put back in the box until the monsters are killed. Evelyn can hold her breath long enough to move through the water. The water is already noisy to the point of confusing the monster, so Evelyn should be able to make it through quickly and get to the stairs. As soon as she touches the wood of the stairs, she grabs the box and creeps her way out. This is of course risky, but far less so than being a sitting duck just inches away from death. That's when Reagan tells her brother that they can't stay up here any longer. Marcus insists that their dad will come for them. While Reagan's back is turned, he falls straight through the roof of the silo and into the corn. The monster in front of Evelyn hears this noise and leaves her alone, while Lee also notices the loud crashing sound, staring right at the silo. Now it's a race against time for the dad to save his children before they brutally die. Reagan sees her brother swimming in the pile of corn. She gestures over to him, telling the boy to stop moving. That's when one of the trap doors falls off, nearly crushing Marcus against the grain. Terrified, Marcus decides to sit tight after hearing this. Outside, Lee notices the monster rushing straight towards his children. Reagan jumps down into the corn to help her drowning brother and pushes the trapdoor over to Marcus in order to prop him up. The boy manages to pull himself to the surface, but Reagan begins sinking into the corn. Marcus sticks his hand in the pool of seeds and manages to pull her out, dragging her onto the trapdoor. He tells Reagan to keep quiet and look around with the flashlight. That's when they hear the other trapdoor above creak, and a monster jumps down out of nowhere. The children quickly dive into the corn and cover themselves with the trapdoor as the creature moves closer. It claws at the metal, piercing the door, but Reagan's hearing aid begins to malfunction, creating a high-pitched ring that the monster can hear. They cover their ears in pain, and the monster claws out more of the door, then retreats when the ringing becomes too intense. Shoving the door off of them, the kids see that the monster tore a giant hole in the side of the silo and gave them a way to escape. Meanwhile, Evelyn takes her and the newborn to Lee's surveillance room as the father runs through the fields with a flashlight. The kids jump from inside the tank and rush over to Lee, finally reuniting with their dad. He gestures to make sure that they're okay, but the creatures aren't finished yet and still hunting for prey. Lee orders them to stay quiet as he looks around the field while hearing more of the monsters. He points the flashlight in all directions and gestures for them to hide in the truck. Lee walks over and grabs an axe, getting ready to take the monster head on, but then he realizes it's been waiting to ambush him on top of a shed. Suddenly, it leaps at him, and Lee swings his weapon, but gets clawed in the stomach before he can react. Marcus screams out for his dad, while Evelyn watches from the surveillance room. Reagan joins her brother in the vehicle as she continues to hear the loud screeching sound. She turns off the hearing aid and is relieved that the sound is gone. That's when Marcus jumps back, shocked to see the monster outside attack. It jumps in the vehicle, scratching at the hood, determined to tear it apart to get to the children inside. Nearby, a badly wounded Lee can barely stand up as he watches the monster, who is only moments away from piercing the truck. Lee loudly tosses the axe on the ground and gains the monster's attention. He faces Reagan, signing "I love you, I have always loved you." With his last signed words, he lets out a giant roar, which instantly attracts the monster, and it jumps to attack the man, as Reagan helplessly watches her own father get brutally killed. Marcus loosens the truck's emergency brake, setting the vehicle careening down the sandy path towards the house. Okay, this is a touching redemptive display of Lee's love for Reagan, and I refuse to let it make me cry right now because it was probably avoidable. Lee thought fast on his feet, which is fantastic, but what about Evelyn? Not to put too much pressure on the person who just gave birth to a human life and is still reeling from that trauma, but could she have done something? Yes. Evelyn is in the surveillance room watching the mess in the cornfield play out. She might not yet be back up to 100% operating in survival power, but she's not helpless. Instead of only watching in horror as her husband dies, she could put the baby down, run outside with the gun that's somewhere in the house, but likely in the room with her, since that's where Lee last had it, and give that monster a piece of her mind. Shooting directly at the creature would not do much good. She's too far away for that bullet to inflict damage. That does not mean it can't create a distracting sound, however. Fire the shotgun into the woods, fire into the ground nearby, fire it into this tree that is only a few feet away. Any of these things would create a loud boom crack that draws the monster's attention away from the children in the truck and Lee bleeding out onto the sand path. Once the monster is distracted, Lee can hop into the car with his children. Oh, and don't forget to grab that axe you've been using. Marcus can release the emergency brake, and everyone glides on down to the house. What does Evelyn do during this interval of monster distraction? As soon as the creature is close enough to the house, which it would be coming straight towards the sound of the noise, in this case Evelyn standing on the porch holding a smoking barrel, who'd shoot it in the head. The key to all of this is the timing. If Lee or the children start moving before Evelyn has headshot that creature, it will head back and turn around. Game over. If Evelyn waits too late to fire into the creature's skull, it will rip her body apart in seconds. There's a lot of risk, but there is also all the reward to be gained from this maneuver. Here it's safe to say the reward outweighs the risk. The children make it back home and reunite with their mom. That's when she hears another screech in the distance and realizes that the monster isn't dead just yet. She quickly escorts the kids into the house and downstairs. Following them, Reagan looks at the large amounts of research that her dad was conducting for their survival for the first time, while Evelyn gives Marcus the baby and hides them in the corner. Reagan grabs a collection of broken hearing aids that Lee worked with as her mom walks over. The two begin to mourn Lee's death, as Evelyn explains she knew about Lee's work. Suddenly, the lights begin to flicker on and off. They then hear footsteps coming towards them, and Evelyn spots the monster crawling downstairs. She readies her shotgun, tracking it as the creature lets out a terrifying screech. But then it pauses to listen as the electrical equipment around it glitches. It destroys a nearby monitor, slowly walking towards the family as they take a quiet step back. Reagan looks at her dad's research for any tips, realizing that this creature has a weakness and knows how to exploit it. Turning the hearing aids on, it lets out a deafening sound that begins to affect the monster. Evelyn notices both her daughter and the monster being affected as Reagan adjusts the headset, intensifying the frequency that causes the creature to react in pain and collapse to the ground. They think that the monster is dead, but it's not done just yet. It stands back up and rushes towards the family, determined to kill them. Acting quickly, the mother shoots it in the face. The survivors watch as it bleeds out on the ground, and it seems like they're finally safe. But the lights start to flicker, making it clear something isn't right. Evelyn and Reagan both turn towards the other monitors, seeing multiple monsters converge on their farm. Now that they know the creature's weakness, Reagan turns on the radio to begin transmitting a frequency so they can fight off the aliens and live in peace, knowing that they'll never see Lee's face ever again.
But what do you think? How would you beat A Quiet Place? Let me know with a comment down below. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a like and subscribe. Check out the How to Beat playlist for more videos like this. And don't forget that from now on, we'll be uploading on Wednesdays and Saturdays. Until next time, have a damn good day.